My jealousy towards my sister was compounded when my boyfriend admitted he finds her prettier than me. Claire's life was always in the shadow of her perfect sister, Lena. But when Claire's jealousy spirals into obsession, Lena offers her a shocking, impossible choice: become her, or disappear forever. What follows is a nightmarish path to perfection, but not the one Claire expected. Discover the twisted truth behind Lena's beauty and the dark secret that Claire unknowingly steps into. Will she embrace her sister's life, or is it too late to escape the consequences? Watch until the end to see what happens when identity, obsession, and beauty collide in a way that will leave you questioning everything. I have always been second place to Lena. Even before I had words to describe it, I felt it, in the way people looked at us, in the way strangers gravitate toward her while I become an afterthought. It was never explicit. No one ever came out and said, "Claire, you are lesser." But it was there, in the little things. The way my parents' eyes would light up whenever Lena walked into a room. The way our teachers fawned over her while I faded into the background. The way boys, no matter how much they liked me, would always look at her a little too long. I used to tell myself that I was imagining it. That it was just my own insecurity poisoning my thoughts. Until Ethan proved me right. It was a Tuesday night, and we were sitting on my couch, eating takeout, watching something neither of us really cared about. A normal night. I don't even remember what led to it. Maybe I made a joke about Lena being perfect. Maybe I said something self-deprecating. Maybe Ethan just thought we were comfortable enough for total honesty. But I do remember his exact words. If I'm being honest, Lena is prettier than you. I laughed. Of course, I did. What else was I supposed to do? Cry? Get angry? Scream? I laughed, rolled my eyes, acted unbothered. And Ethan? He didn't even realize what he had done. He just kept eating. I smiled through the rest of the night, kissed him goodbye, waved at him as he drove away. I even went to bed like normal, tucked under my blankets, staring at my ceiling like nothing had changed. But inside, something had cracked open. A rotting pit inside my chest that had been there for years, festering quietly, suddenly split wide open. Lena is prettier than you. I turned onto my side, squeezing my eyes shut. Lena is prettier than you. I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to drown it out. Lena is prettier than you. It wasn't just Ethan. It was everyone. They all thought it. Always had. Ethan was just the first to say it out loud. The next morning, I woke up with a new purpose. For the first time in my life, I stopped running from the truth. Instead, I embraced it. Lena is better than me. So I needed to study her. Learn what made her so special. What made her the favorite. What made her the prettier sister. And maybe, if I could understand it, maybe I could become it. It started small. I began watching her more closely. Not in an obvious way. I wasn't following her around or anything. But I started paying attention, really paying attention, to all the little details I had ignored before. The way she moved. The way she smiled just enough to seem inviting, but never too much to seem eager. The way she spoke softly, but with confidence. The way she made eye contact, but just for a second too long, enough to make people feel special. I started mimicking her. Adjusting my posture, softening my voice. Training myself to mirror her without making it obvious. I changed the way I styled my hair. Bought the same perfume she used. Even started ordering the same drinks as her whenever we went out. And yet, it wasn't enough. No matter what I did, no matter how much I copied, she was still effortless, and I was just trying. She could roll out of bed and look ethereal, while I spent hours fixing myself just to look decent. People still gravitated toward her. Ethan still watched her a little too long when we were all together. I started feeling angry all the time. Not just angry. Hateful. And it terrified me. Because it wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was something darker. Something hungry. I should have stopped. Should have let it go. But I couldn't. I was too deep in it now. So instead, I kept watching. Kept studying. Kept waiting for the next thing to steal. Until I found something I never should have seen. It started with little things. A new skincare routine, an updated wardrobe, a slight adjustment to my makeup. Subtle. Easy to explain if anyone asked. But no one asked. Because no one noticed. I could stand next to Lena, wearing the exact same outfit, with the same hairstyle, holding myself with the same poised confidence. And still, she was the one who got the compliments. I was background noise. She was the music. And I hated her for it. I started spending more time at her apartment. Not because I wanted to. But because I needed to observe her up close. To understand. I'd watch how she touched her hair, how she angled her face just right when taking selfies, how she applied her lipstick in a way that made her mouth look fuller without being obvious. She wasn't just beautiful. She was calculated. And if she could learn it, so could I. So I started mimicking her. The first time I tried on one of her dresses, it felt electric. It wasn't just a dress. It was hers. It smelled like her perfume, her skin, her world. I stood in front of my mirror, running my hands over the fabric, feeling the way it clung to me, shaping me into something new. I tilted my head, trying to replicate the way she smiled in photos, not too wide, just enough to be charming. I whispered, "I can be you." And for a second, just 1 second, I believed it. But it was never enough. I started hearing her voice in my head. Soft, effortless, dripping with charm. So I practiced. I sat in front of my vanity, repeating her words, adjusting the pitch, the rhythm. "Oh, stop. You're so bad. That's hilarious, I love that. Oh, I don't know, I just threw this on." I recorded myself and played it back, over and over. Something was always off. I wasn't light enough. Not breezy enough. Not her. No matter how hard I tried, it was like there was something missing. Something I couldn't copy. Then, there was Ethan. I started watching him, too. Whenever Lena was around, he'd get this look, just a flicker, just a second too long, but I saw it. Like she was the sun, and I was just standing in her shadow. It didn't matter that I was his girlfriend. She was still the prettier one. She was still the better one. And no matter what I did, would always be second place. That's when the jealousy turned into something worse. Not just resentment. Not just envy. But hatred. A deep, crawling, twisting sickness in my stomach every time I heard her name. A quiet, gnawing rage whenever someone compared us. A cold, burning truth that I couldn't ignore anymore. I didn't just want to be like her. I wanted to be her. And if I couldn't, I would make sure no one else could have her either. The first dream came the night after Ethan stared at Lena for too long again. It started the way all my dreams did, hazy, slow, shifting like liquid. I was in my room, standing in front of the mirror, wearing one of Lena's dresses again. But this time, something was off. My reflection wasn't mirroring me. I raised my hand. The reflection didn't move. It just stood there, staring back at me with Lena's eyes. I gasped, reaching up to touch my face, and that's when my skin peeled away like wet paper. I didn't scream. I should have screamed. Instead, I watched, calm, fascinated, as I pulled the flesh from my face, revealing something new beneath it. Lena. Her cheekbones, her perfect lips, her soft, glowing skin. I dropped the mask that used to be me, watching as it crumpled onto the floor like discarded wrapping paper. I smiled. And the reflection smiled back. Then I woke up. I shot upright in bed, gasping for air, my skin drenched in sweat. The room felt too bright, too sharp, like my own reality was off-kilter. I rushed to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror, expecting to see something different. But it was just me. The same plain, ordinary, lesser version of Lena I had always been. I should have felt horrified. I should have been shaken. But instead, I felt exhilarated. Because for the first time in my life, I had seen it. The moment I had become her. And I needed to feel that again. The next morning, I started small. I stole one of Lena's perfumes. Not a full bottle, that would be obvious. Just a few spritzes on my wrists before heading out. Then I started messing with her things. A missing lipstick here, a pair of earrings mysteriously misplaced. I spilled foundation onto her favorite blouse. Poked tiny, invisible holes into her stockings so they would rip at the worst possible moment. Ruined her morning coffee with way too much salt, just to see her reaction. But the thing that drove me insane? She never lost her composure. She would just sigh, smile softly, and say, "Guess I'm having bad luck this week." And I wanted to rip that smile off her face. I upped my game. I started planting doubt in her mind. I sent her anonymous messages from a fake account. "You're not as special as you think you are. Beauty fades. Hope you're ready for that." I whispered subtle insults, disguised as jokes. "You ever wonder what you'd look like without makeup? Probably still cute. Just different. Isn't it funny how people only love you for your looks? What happens when that goes away?" I wanted to see her crack. I wanted to see that perfect mask slip. But it never did. No matter what I did, Lena stayed perfect. And I hated her for it. Hated her so much I could barely breathe. So I knew. I had to do more. I had to break her. Or I had to become her. Either way. Something had to change. It was at the family dinner when it first hit me. I should have seen it sooner, but sometimes the most obvious things are the hardest to notice when you're caught up in your own obsession. We were all gathered around the table, the usual chatter filling the air as my parents talked about their day and Lena sat there, effortlessly charming as always. I was picking at my food, pretending to listen, but I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting toward her. There was something off about her. Something subtle, but it was there. Lena, who normally devoured her meal, was barely touching hers. She had a fork in her hand, but it was just tapping lightly on the plate. She would push the food around, making it look like she was eating, but her plate was practically untouched. It wasn't just her eating habits that were strange, it was her skin. Her face was perfect, almost unnaturally so. Smooth. Too smooth. There was something too porcelain-like about it, the way her cheekbones seemed to glow in the dim light, her skin looking like it could have been carved from marble. I blinked and quickly looked away. I knew I had to keep my thoughts in check. But I couldn't help it. Something felt off. I caught myself watching her more than usual, trying to figure out what was so different, but I couldn't pinpoint it. Lena was always beautiful, but tonight she seemed like she was glowing in a way that made my insides twist. I tried to act normal, forcing a smile and making small talk with the family. But the whole time, my mind kept wandering back to Lena, her face, her eating habits, the strange distant look in her eyes as she smiled politely at everyone. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had to know what was going on with her. I waited until the house was quiet, the sound of my parents' bedroom door clicking shut behind them. Then, I crept downstairs and made my way to Lena's room, moving as silently as possible. Lena's room was always perfectly arranged, just like her life. But tonight, it felt like I was intruding, like the very air in there was different, somehow heavier. I quietly opened the door, careful not to wake her. The soft glow of the desk lamp illuminated her room just enough for me to see the details, the untouched bed, the impeccable order, the little knickknacks lined up on the shelf. But it was what I found beneath her bed that made my stomach lurch. I bent down, my hands trembling as I reached under the bed, feeling around for something that seemed to be pressing against the floor. My fingers brushed against a cold metal surface, a small box, locked tight. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I quickly pulled it out, my heart racing. The box was a simple metal case, but the weight of it felt wrong, like something dangerous was inside. I hesitated for just a moment, my thoughts screaming at me to leave it alone. But I didn't listen. I needed to know. I found a hidden key, tucked into the drawer by her nightstand. The lock clicked open, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. What I saw inside sent a chill through my veins. Dozens of empty foundation bottles, too many for one person, even one as obsessed with beauty as Lena. Some of them were cheap, others expensive, but none of them were the same. They were old, some still had remnants of product at the bottom, others were completely empty, the plastic cracked and yellowing with age. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was the glove. It was tucked into the corner of the box, wrapped up tightly in a small piece of fabric. When I picked it up, my heart almost stopped. It was a surgical glove. But the fingers weren't just filled with air. They were hollow, with some sort of gel-like substance inside, like some sick, twisted replica of a hand. I nearly dropped the glove, but something kept me rooted to the spot. What the hell was going on with Lena? What was she really doing to stay so perfect? Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, Lena. I quickly stuffed the glove and bottles back into the box, trying to make everything look like it hadn't been touched. But it was too late. She was already at the door. And when I turned around, I saw the cold smile creeping across her face, her eyes gleaming with something dark. "You should have stayed out of my room, Claire," she said softly, the door clicking shut behind her. And for the first time, I realized something. I had never truly known her. The moment my fingers brushed against the smooth, cold metal, my heart started racing. I knew I shouldn't be doing this. The nagging voice in my head kept screaming, "Leave it alone, Claire." But the other part of me, the one that was so obsessed with Lena, kept pushing me forward, urging me to open the damn box. I turned the lock with trembling fingers, and as the lid creaked open, a strange, musty smell hit me, like something old, something forgotten. Inside were faces. Not masks, not distorted art pieces, but real faces, human faces, preserved in some grotesque manner. My breath hitched in my throat, and I couldn't look away. They were arranged in a neat pile, like a sick collection, stitched together, the seams visible around the edges of each one. There were no eyes, no noses, just smooth, flawless skin that had been sewn together like a patchwork quilt. Some had no expression, others were contorted, their mouths slightly open, frozen in an eternal, haunting smile. I could barely keep my hands from shaking as I lifted one of the faces, feeling the soft, smooth texture beneath my fingers. It felt like human skin, but not. Something was off about it, like it was more synthetic, like it had been altered or treated in some way. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then, I realized the terrifying truth. Lena didn't wear makeup. Lena didn't rely on creams and powders to create the perfect complexion. She wore skin. Real human skin. These faces weren't masks. They were living pieces of someone else. I dropped the case, my hands trembling, and stumbled backward, my mind spinning, unable to process what I had just seen. The room spun, and my legs gave out beneath me. I landed hard on the floor, gasping for air, but I couldn't breathe. It was like my lungs had forgotten how to function, my heart pounding in my chest like it was about to explode. I stared at the pile of faces. They stared back at me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find the voice. My body felt like it was frozen, as if the very horror of the moment had locked me in place, unable to escape. How long had this been going on? What did she do with all of them? How many faces were hidden away? The questions swirled in my mind, but nothing made sense. And then, I heard the sound. Footsteps. Not just any footsteps. Her footsteps. I turned slowly, my breath still ragged, as I felt a chill creep down my spine. Lena was standing in the doorway, her face as calm as ever, but there was something dark behind her eyes. "You shouldn't have looked, Claire," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, but it cut through me like a knife. I couldn't move, couldn't say a word. The room felt like it was closing in on me, suffocating me, as Lena stepped into the room, her eyes fixed on the box and the faces scattered on the floor. She didn't look surprised. She didn't seem angry. It was as if she had known this moment was coming. Like this was part of her plan all along. "You see, Claire," Lena continued, her voice suddenly colder, "I've always had to be perfect. Always had to be the one everyone wanted to be. And in order to do that, I had to become someone else. Over and over." I couldn't process what she was saying. "What the hell is this?" I finally choked out, pointing at the faces. Lena tilted her head slightly, almost like she was pitying me. "It's simple," she said, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "I wear what others leave behind. I take what they don't need. And it's perfect. No imperfections. No flaws." She stepped closer to me, her movements slow, deliberate. "You're right," she added softly. "You'll never be like me. Not in the way you think." Her smile was thin, almost sadistic, as she crouched down beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I had to be someone else for so long, Claire," she whispered. "And now, you'll get to see what it's like." And that was when I realized. Lena wasn't just perfect. She was a monster. And I had just become her next victim. I should have screamed. I should have fought back. But I couldn't move. My body felt like it was made of stone, every part of me stiff and numb, frozen in place. Lena. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. Her face, always the picture of composure, was now softened, almost sad, as she kneeled beside the box. Her hands moved delicately, picking up the faces I had spilled, as if they were fragile treasures she couldn't bear to ruin. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she murmured, her voice a soft, almost tender whisper. Her fingers caressed the edges of the faces as if they were old lovers, her touch slow and deliberate. I watched, too terrified to look away, as she placed each one back into the box. It was like something inside me had snapped. The sheer calmness of her actions, the way she treated this grotesque collection with such care and reverence, made my skin crawl. The sickening reality of what I was witnessing started to sink in. Lena wasn't just a beautiful sister with flawless skin. She wasn't just a person who got the attention, the affection, the love. She was a predator, and everything I had ever known about her, about us, was a lie. Her eyes, those cold, distant eyes, turned back to me as I struggled to breathe, my chest tight, like I was suffocating. "You were never supposed to see that," she whispered softly, her words a soft blow to my mind, a twist of the knife in the most insidious way. It didn't matter that she had just confessed to wearing other people's faces. It didn't matter that she was essentially a monster, slowly consuming the lives of everyone around her. What hit me the hardest was the underlying calmness in her voice. The complete lack of urgency, the absence of any real fear. She had already won. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, anything, to break free from the suffocating tension that had wrapped itself around my throat. But before I could move, I felt her hand on my wrist. Shoo! Her grip was too strong, too cold, as she pulled me back toward her. The shock of her touch sent an electric jolt through my body, but I couldn't break free. She was too strong, stronger than any sister should be. I felt her fingers tighten, and I gasped, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You've been so jealous of me." Her voice was low now, almost cooing, like she was comforting me, like she was explaining something inevitable. "Don't you want to know my secret?" The words cut through me. I felt my heart skip a beat, then another. I wasn't sure if the fear was coming from the disgusting truth of what she had done or from the paralyzing realization that everything she said made perfect sense. I was jealous of her. I was obsessed with being her. And now I had to understand what she was offering. I had no choice but to listen. Lena tilted her head slightly, her eyes still locked onto mine, as if she was watching my mind break apart in front of her. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like someone with nothing to hide. "You've been trying to become me, Claire," she said softly. "But you don't realize it yet. You've been consumed by jealousy, and now you've crossed the line. You're just like me now." Her words hit me like a hammer, the weight of what she was saying finally sinking in. My stomach turned, and I wanted to scream again, but my voice was stuck in my throat. For the first time, I truly saw her. And I realized that I had been following her down this dark path without even knowing it. I had been sinking into the same pit she had long ago climbed into, chasing her, trying to become what I could never be. "You want my secret, don't you?" Lena asked, her voice now a soft, dangerous purr. I couldn't speak. My entire being was frozen, not by fear, but by the realization of how deep I had fallen into this madness. And then, with a soft, knowing smile, Lena whispered, "It's too late now, Claire. You've seen too much." The words echoed in my ears as I realized I would never be free of her now. The silence in the room felt suffocating. Lena's words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with the truth I had refused to see, the truth that had been there all along, right under my nose. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The realization of what she had done, what she was capable of, crushed me. I had thought I understood her, but I had only scratched the surface. And now, as she hovered in front of me, her hands resting delicately on the box filled with those faces, her collection, her trophies, she started to explain. "My beauty isn't natural," Lena said softly, almost as if she were explaining the most mundane thing in the world. There was no hesitation in her voice, no hint of remorse. Just an icy calm, like she had come to terms with what she was. I stared at her, unsure whether to scream or cry. She was admitting it. She was finally telling me the truth. "It's borrowed," she continued, a slow smile curling at the corners of her lips. "I take what others don't need anymore. I graft their faces onto mine, piece by piece, every few years." My mind screeched in protest, refusing to accept the words coming out of her mouth. I thought I had understood what she meant when she said she had a flawless face, that it wasn't natural, that she had done something to maintain her beauty. But this was something far worse. "What do you mean by grafting?" I whispered, barely able to form the question, my throat dry. Lena turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something dark in her eyes. "It's painful at first," she said matter-of-factly, "but then you become perfect." I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't imagine the kind of pain she was describing. The kind of torture involved in stealing another person's face and making it her own. How could she have done this so many times and still walked around like nothing was wrong? But the most disturbing part was her calmness. There was no guilt in her words, no shame, just a sick pride. "And you wanted to be me so badly, Claire," she said, leaning in closer now, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Maybe you can." My heart skipped a beat as I registered what she was offering, or rather, what she was threatening. She was giving me an opportunity to join her. To become her. I backed away instinctively, but there was nowhere to go. Her eyes followed my every move, like she was enjoying watching me writhe in disbelief. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "No, Lena, I don't want to be you." "You already do," she said, almost sweeter now, as if coaxing a frightened animal. "You always have. I can see it in the way you've been watching me, studying me, trying to take everything from me." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips. She wasn't wrong. She had always known, she had always seen through me, and now, there was nothing left for me to hide. She took a step closer, and I felt my pulse race. She wasn't offering me a choice. She was about to take. Lena's hand moved to the side of the table, and for the first time, I noticed what she had been hiding behind the box of faces. A scalpel. She held it up in front of my face, her fingers gripping the handle with disturbing precision, the blade glinting under the soft light. "I didn't want to do this," Lena said softly, her voice almost a croon. "But you made me." I didn't know whether to run or scream. I didn't even know if I could move at all. The fear was paralyzing. I could feel my mind fracturing, breaking down, as she stepped forward. My eyes flickered to the door, but it was too late. She was too close. I had no idea how I had ended up here, standing in the shadow of my sister's twisted, sickening transformation. And now she was going to finish it, take me and turn me into her. The scalpel glinted one more time, and I realized I didn't have a choice anymore. "Don't worry, Claire," Lena whispered, her breath cold against my ear. "You'll be perfect. You'll finally be just like me." And then, in the blink of an eye, I felt the cold edge of the blade against my skin. The last thing I heard before everything went black was Lena's voice, soft and assuring. "Don't worry, Claire. You'll be beautiful." The cold metal of the scalpel pressed against my skin, and for a moment, everything around me stopped. Lena's eyes locked onto mine, and she tilted her head, almost affectionately, like she was giving me a gift I couldn't refuse. "You wanted to be me, Claire. Now you can." Her voice was almost gentle, but there was a cold, calculated edge to it that made my skin crawl. "You have a choice. You can become me. You can take this face, this perfection, and live the life you've always wanted." I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the weight of her words crushing me from all sides. "Or?" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. Her lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a smile of sympathy. It was one of control, of someone who knew they held all the power. "Or die, forgotten. The choice is yours." The words rang in my ears, and my stomach churned. I could feel the tremble in my hands, the fight within me to refuse, to run, to scream, but there was nowhere to go. I had no choice. Not really. Everything I had ever wanted, all the jealousy, all the hate, they were meaningless now. The truth was in front of me. Lena was giving me an opportunity to become perfect. To take her life, to become her. A life filled with adoration, with beauty, with everything I thought I could never have. I thought of Ethan, the way he looked at her. The way he looked at me, and I knew. I knew I would do anything to have that. To feel like I was enough. Weeks passed. I watched from the shadows, my mind still reeling from what had happened that night, the night I had made my choice. The night I had given up everything. Lena, as always, was radiant. She laughed, her voice the same as always. She smiled, and the world seemed to revolve around her, the beauty and grace that had once been unattainable for me now effortlessly hers. But I couldn't stop staring at her hands. They were faintly scarred, the skin slightly rough, like the marks of someone who had undergone an ordeal. And then, her smile. It was still perfect, but it was different. Slightly off. There was a subtle shift in the way her lips curled, a faint trace of something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't Lena anymore. I had taken her place. And no one would ever know that it was me now.